Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and as always, told how to voice radio. So today, I'm going to be showing you all the cards that are being rotated from Roaring Skies that you should care about. I've already done my headlines of rotation video. I've already done my Primal Clash video. Now it's time to look at Roaring Skies, and once again we're going to be splitting into three categories: the cards that could have been fun text but never really saw any play, the main Pokemon we're losing that we should be sad about, and then the trainers. And then at the very end I'll give you a quick primer on the main cards we're losing. So, the Pokemon that could have been fun text but never saw much play. First of all, Executor. For 1 grass energy, 20 damage times the number of colourless Pokemon your opponent has in play. You had Forest of Giant Plants to get him out nice and quickly, and of course against decks like Rayquaza, who just played basically Rayquaza and Shaymin, this always seemed like it could have been great, but it was way too specific. Shedinja always seemed like a little bit of fun. 50 damage times the number of damage counters on Shedinja. Now, of course, again, you've got Forest of Giant Plants, and you had Team Magma's secret base, so you could get 2 damage counters on Nincada before you went and evolved. And then, of course, you could always use something like Mew to copy it, so you had a higher damage output because you had more HP. It was always seen as a really fun rogue deck, but it never really got a huge amount of traction. Natu was always seen as quite good just because it had Delta Plus. You take a KO, you get an extra prize. Now, to be honest, it only did 10 damage times the amount of energy attached to your opponent's active, which wasn't very much, so you really had to get a Pokemon almost KO'd and then bring in Natu to take the extra prize. It was, to put it bluntly, ladies and gentlemen, a little bit clunky. Now, there were 2 Banette, both of which saw a little bit of play, so I'm thinking I maybe should have put them in the main card section, but it's too late now. I mean, it's not, but I'm not changing my list now. Banette, the non-ancient trait, just said that each Pokemon tool card in play had no effect. Stop your opponent retreating with Floatstone, take off the extra HP with something like Fighting Fury Bout. That was fun. And then the other Banette had Doubter Evolution, so you could evolve up straight away, and had Evolution Jammer. 20 damage for 1 Psychic, and your opponent cannot evolve from their hand. They could still use something like Evo Soda or Wally. People tried to make this into a rogue deck, but there were too many ways around it, and against basic focus decks, it was just trash. So it never saw a huge amount of play. Togekiss always seemed like a Pokemon that was destined to be really good. It had Delta Evolution, so you could evolve up straight away from Togetic, and of course it had a really nice ability which just allowed you to get a load more energy into play. So what's the problem? The problem is we never had a Togetic that had Delta Evolution, which means although we could evolve the Togekiss up from the Togetic, we had to wait a turn to get the Togetic out. That meant that it was just way too slow, ladies and gentlemen, as fun as it looked. Now, there was a Dragonite with Delta Plus. Yay! More prizes. And of course, it did 150 damage. But it was a stage 2 that took 5 energy. Even with double dragon energy, that was way too much. We had the Dragon Mega Rayquaza that could do 300 damage, which was quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, ludicrous. The problem was, even with something like Reshiram, even with Mega Turbo, when this set first came out, people really tried to make this deck. It looked like a sure bet, but it was never particularly good. Speaking of which, we had the Reshiram, allowed you to attach an extra fire energy to a dragon Pokemon, but it was just a bit too slow and awkward. Then you had to get it out the active, and the attack was terrible. It just never saw the play it should have done. And finally, Altaria just takes away the weakness of your colourless Pokemon. Now, there's an argument you could even be playing this with Drampa at the moment. It did for a while see play with Mega Rayquaza, but essentially the player base decided, you know what? Rayquaza is better when we go consistent, when it's all about getting Rayquaza out as fast as possible, and the decks that played Altaria were a little bit slower because they were playing more Pokemon, fewer consistency cards, and most good players dropped Altaria fairly quickly. So, now let's go and have a look at the really good Pokemon that did see play. that we are losing, and there aren't actually very many of them. We're losing the Articuno with Delta Plus. This was the one Pokemon that had Delta Plus that we are really going to miss, that did see a huge amount of play, and it's even been seeing play recently with something like Aqua Patch, for instance. Really fun Pokemon. Tri-Edge was not a terrible attack. We're going to miss it, ladies and gentlemen. We're also going to miss Absol. Now, Absol's use has ebbed and flowed a little bit, but moving 3 damage counters from one of your opponent's Pokemon to another is just too good. It was a counter against Gyarados for a while, which was actually really fun, because you moved damage counters from one Magikarp to another. So not only did you KO a Magikarp, but you then left another Magikarp with no damage on, so it wasn't adding to Gyarados' attack, which was funny. It saw a little bit of play with Gardevoir, because you could use it over and over again as you just discarded it and then refreshed it into your deck. We're not losing Latios EX, because Latios EX was reprinted as a tin promo. I believe it was promo 72, which of course means it's above 67, which means it's staying in the format. We are losing the Mega though, and the Mega's a little bit sad, because you could snipe for 120 damage, which was actually pretty good. I saw people playing this at regional championships and not doing terribly. Of course, you really needed double Dragon Energy, so you could discard that every turn and keep this going. It wasn't amazing, but it saw a little bit of play. And although we're keeping Latios, it's sad we're losing the Mega. We are losing Mega Rayquaza. I don't need to say much about Mega Rayquaza. I've done a video about Mega Rayquaza. Search me channel, you'll find it easily. It's a deck that's been often talked about. It's been a good deck for a while. It's been the best deck in the format. It's been okay. It has ebbed and flowed, but it's always been good. There was a reprint of the Mega Rayquaza in Ancient Origins with a terrible ancient trait, but that's rotating as well. And then, of course, the big one. We're losing Shaymin EX. We are losing one of our best methods to draw cards. Now, to be fair, a lot of players are really favouring Tapu Lele over Shaymin for the higher HP and the better attack. And we've still got things like Octillery, which might work, but if Octillery was better than Shaymin, people would have been playing it over Shaymin. And they're not. We are really going to miss Shaymin. In terms of trainers, we're losing Mega Turbo, so all Mega decks that haven't been rotated, like the aforementioned Gardevoir, just got worse. Revive is not going because it was reprinted in Evolutions. We're losing Skyfield, and there's a whole bunch of Pokemon like Raichu, like Incineroar, that are staying in the format, that want as many bench Pokemon as they can get, that are going to miss Skyfield. We're losing Steven, which only really saw play in Groudon, which is rotating. There was a full art Steven in Ancient Origins, but that's also rotating. We're losing Trainer's Mail. Now, Trainer's Mail was for a very long time a staple card in almost every deck. Look at the top 4 cards, find a trainer card, pop it in your hand. Consistency was king. Now, it has seen a dip in play because of Garbodor at the moment. You know, really feasting on your items, but it was still good and still played in a bunch of decks. There was a secret rare in Ancient Origins, but that's rotated. There was an alternate art print in the Battle Arena decks with black and white Kyurem, but that's an alternate art print, which means that's not going to save it. We're losing Trainer's Mail. We're not losing Ultra Ball because that was reprinted in both Fates Collide and Sun and Moon. We're not losing Wally because that was reprinted in Generations. We are losing Wide Lens. I always thought Wide Lens was really ripe for the picking. You know, things like Vikavolt GX I thought were always good partners for Wide Lens, hitting the bench for weakness. Really didn't see much play. Winona was another thing which really saw play in the early days with Rayquaza, but actually Hooper did what Winona did for Rayquaza better, and because it was only for colourless Pokemon, people really just played Hooper, and Winona didn't see much play at all. But the last 2 cards we are really going to miss. We're losing Double Dragon Energy. All dragon Pokemon have awkward attack costs, at least the vast majority of them. Double Dragon saved it. If there is one card that I think needs to be reprinted, not that I think I want it, I think it needs to be reprinted, it's Double Dragon Energy. We are going to miss that. and Versus Seeker. Versus Seeker is going to change the way we build decks. At the moment, we all play a bunch of supporters for Versus Seeker. We Ultra Ball our supporters in the early game, knowing we can grab them back with Versus Seeker. In the late game, we're just looking for a Versus Seeker for a Lysander to win the game. It's easy. This is what we do. Well, you know what, ladies and gentlemen? You cannot do that anymore. Now, finding supporters is not going to be difficult. We've got Tapu Lele, but reusing supporters is not going to be done. You could use Puzzle of Time, but I fear that's going to be clunky and, Garbodor. Really, ladies and gentlemen, here, I think we're just going to be playing thicker supporter lines, and I think a lot of decks are going to go to 3 or 4 Tapu Lele so that you're just searching them out for the first time rather than relying on reusing them. But for players that have never played in a format without Versus Seeker, and it's been a while, this is going to be a big, big change. So to recap, the big cards that have been rotated, there aren't that many of them, but they are really big. Articuno, Mega Rayquaza, Shaymin, Mega Turbo, Skyfield, Trainer's Mail, Double Dragon Energy, and Versus Seeker. Of all the sets rotated, this one is going to have maybe the biggest impact. Although, to be fair, Ancient Origins is going to be pretty bad as well. Losing Versus Seeker and Shaymin in the same set, that is literally going to change the way we build decks. Losing Mega Turbo basically destroys Mega decks. Losing Double Dragon Energy destroys Dragon's decks. This, ladies and gentlemen, this is big. But tell me what you think about the rotation in terms of Roaring Skies. That's what the comment section is there for. Go nuts. Be nice. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter @TheWassy, and Twitch at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. And if you want to support the channel, you can do so at patreon.com/PTCGRadio. The most important thing, as always, look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.